"We're so sorry, Mom, but we just can't make it tomorrow night." My son's voice through the phone carried that familiar apologetic tone, the one I'd heard countless times over the years. I clutched the receiver tighter, staring at the birthday cake recipe I'd been planning to bake myself. 65 years old tomorrow, and I'd be celebrating alone. "It's just that this travel opportunity came up suddenly," Eric continued, background noise suggesting he was at an airport. "A last-minute deal to Europe that we absolutely couldn't pass up. You understand, right?" I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "Of course I understand. Europe is lovely this time of year." "You're the best, Mom," he said, relief evident in his voice. "We'll make it up to you when we get back. Maybe take you to that Italian place you like?" The Italian place I liked was where I'd already made reservations for the three of us tomorrow night. "That sounds nice," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Have a wonderful trip. Be safe." "Love you, Mom." "Oh, Vanessa wants to say hi." I heard a rustle as the phone changed hands. "Martha, darling." My daughter-in-law's voice bubbled through the line with manufactured enthusiasm. "So sorry about your birthday dinner, just terrible timing with this trip. But you always say experiences matter more than things, right?" I had indeed said that, when encouraging them to spend more meaningfully and less impulsively. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Absolutely," I agreed, playing along. "Where in Europe are you headed?" "Paris first, then the French Riviera, finishing in Rome." Vanessa's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "And guess what? Eric managed to score us an upgrade to first class. Can you believe it?" My eyebrows rose involuntarily. First class? On their combined income as a mid-level bank employee and part-time yoga instructor? "That's wonderful," I managed. "How fortunate." "We really lucked out," she continued, oblivious to my concern. "Listen, we're boarding now. Happy birthday in advance. 64 is going to be amazing." 65, I corrected quietly, but she had already hung up. I set the phone down and looked around my tidy kitchen, the evening sun casting long shadows across the countertops. The calendar on my refrigerator had tomorrow's date circled in red marker: birthday dinner with Eric and Vanessa, 7 p.m. I should have known better than to get my hopes up. This wasn't the first time they'd canceled plans with me, but it stung more sharply today, perhaps because this birthday felt significant. My first milestone birthday since Harold died 5 years ago. Or perhaps because I'd been looking forward to sharing my news. I'd finally decided to sell the house and move to that coastal retirement community I'd been eyeing. With a resigned sigh, I picked up the phone again and dialed the restaurant. "Bella Notte, how may I help you?" "Hello, I need to change a reservation for tomorrow night at 7. Campbell, party of 3. "Of course, Mrs. Campbell. What would you like to change?" I hesitated. "Could you make it for 1 person instead of 3? A brief pause. "Certainly. Will there be anything else?" "No, thank you," I said, then added impulsively, "Actually, could you please not bring a birthday dessert with a candle? I had requested that earlier, but I'd rather not now." "As you wish, Mrs. Campbell. We'll see you tomorrow at 7. After hanging up, I abandoned the cake recipe and poured myself a glass of wine. Harold would have known exactly what to say to make me laugh about this. He'd been gone for 5 years, but I still caught myself turning to share thoughts with him, especially in quiet moments like this. "Well, Harold," I said aloud to the empty kitchen, "looks like it's just me tomorrow night." The next evening, I dressed carefully in a blue dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, applied makeup with extra attention, and drove myself to Bella Notte. The maitre d' greeted me warmly but couldn't quite hide the flicker of pity in his eyes as he led me to a table clearly meant for a group, now set for 1. "Your server will be right with you," he said kindly. "And may I wish you a happy birthday, Mrs. Campbell." I thanked him, settling into my chair and placing my purse on the empty seat beside me. The restaurant buzzed with conversation and laughter, families celebrating, couples leaning close across candlelit tables, friends raising glasses in toasts. Everyone seemed to be with someone. Everyone except me. My phone chimed with notifications, birthday wishes on social media from former colleagues, distant relatives, neighbors, but nothing from Eric or Vanessa. They were probably in the air now, champagne glasses clinking as they stretched their legs in the spacious first-class cabin. I ordered a glass of Pinot Noir and the salmon I'd been looking forward to. When the waiter asked if anyone would be joining me, I shook my head and watched as he removed the extra place settings, each one a small reminder of my solitude. As I sipped my wine, I found myself wondering how my son and his wife could afford first-class tickets to Europe when just 3 months ago, Eric had called asking if I could loan them $3,000 for car repairs. It wasn't the first such request. Over the past 2 years, I'd given them nearly $20,000 for various emergencies and expenses, money that had never been repaid despite their initial promises. "It's just until my bonus comes through, Mom," Eric would say. "We'll pay you back as soon as Vanessa's studio starts turning a profit," he'd promise. I'd always said yes. What mother wouldn't help her only child if she could? After a career as a high school teacher and Harold's prudent investments, I was comfortable, though far from wealthy. I could afford to help, so I did. But first-class tickets to Europe? Luxury hotels? Something didn't add up. The waiter brought my salmon, beautifully plated and garnished. "Enjoy your meal, ma'am." I stared at the empty chairs across from me, a sudden resolve hardening in my chest. This birthday might be spent alone, but I was determined it would be the last one where I felt like an afterthought in my own life, an ATM rather than a mother. Tomorrow, I decided as I cut into my salmon, I would make some calls. It was time to understand exactly how my son was financing his lavish lifestyle, and perhaps time to make some long overdue changes. Little did I know that my 65th birthday would mark not just another year of life, but the beginning of a reckoning that would change my relationship with my son forever. The morning after my solitary birthday dinner, I awoke with purpose. Rather than dwelling on yesterday's disappointment, I made myself a proper breakfast, poached eggs on toast, the way Harold used to prepare them, and sat down at my computer with a cup of strong coffee. First, I checked my email. Several birthday wishes had arrived overnight, including one from my sister in Arizona and another from my best friend Grace, who was traveling in New Zealand, but nothing from Eric or Vanessa. Not that I expected anything while they were flying to Europe, but the absence still stung. On impulse, I opened Facebook. I rarely used social media, finding it more overwhelming than entertaining, but I kept an account to see photos of friends' grandchildren and stay connected with former students. I typed Eric's name in the search bar and clicked on his profile. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. There, posted 7 hours ago, was a photo of my son and daughter-in-law reclining in plush seats, champagne flutes in hand, with the caption, "First class all the way to Paris, living the dream. Blessed your first-class life." They weren't just in first class. The photo showed lie-flat seats, premium headphones, and what looked like a multi-course meal being served on actual china. This wasn't just an upgrade. This was top-tier international first class, the kind that costs thousands per ticket. I scrolled down. 4 hours ago, another post appeared. A nighttime shot of the Eiffel Tower glittering against the dark sky. Made it to Paris, checking into the Ritz before exploring the City of Lights. Bucket list, yacht, luxury. The Ritz. In Paris. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my coffee cup. The last time Eric had called for money, just 3 weeks ago, he'd claimed they were struggling to make rent on their apartment. I'd wired him $1,800 without hesitation. Now, they were staying at the Ritz. I clicked on Vanessa's profile next. She was more active on social media than Eric, constantly posting carefully staged photos of their life, always giving the impression of success and luxury. Her latest post made my blood run cold. "Finally using Martha's birthday week to take the European vacation we've been planning. Sorry we'll miss the cake, but we're celebrating you from Paris. No regrets, just treat yourself." Martha's birthday week? As if my birthday was somehow the reason for their trip, rather than an inconvenient obligation they'd chosen to skip. And they were celebrating me from Paris? By not even sending a text message? I sat back in my chair, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just thoughtlessness. This felt deliberate, calculated even. With newfound determination, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into my online banking. Harold had always handled our finances during our marriage, and even after his death, I'd maintained a somewhat hands-off approach, reviewing paper statements but rarely checking accounts online. Eric had offered to help modernize my financial management about a year ago, setting up online access for me, but also insisting I add him as an authorized user in case of emergency. The dashboard loaded, showing my checking and savings accounts. The balances looked correct, but something prompted me to check my recent transaction history. I clicked through to the detailed view. My heart nearly stopped. There, Listed over the past 3 months were multiple transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Some were labeled Eric Support or Family Help, but others had no description at all. Together, they totaled over $30,000, far more than the occasional loans I'd knowingly provided. With growing horror, I clicked through to my investment account, the nest egg Harold had carefully built for our retirement, the fund I'd been living on since his death. The balance was nearly $80,000 lower than I remembered from my last quarterly statement. My hands shook as I picked up my phone and dialed Grace, who had been a financial advisor before retirement. "Happy birthday again, Martha," she answered cheerfully, despite the time difference in New Zealand. "Grace," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I need your help. I think Eric has been taking money from my accounts without my knowledge." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Finally, Grace sighed. "Martha, I've been worried about this for a while. The way they live, it never added up." "You suspected?" I asked, a hint of accusation in my tone. "I've had concerns," she admitted, "but you were always so quick to defend them, to explain away their lifestyle as good investments or career advancements. I didn't want to overstep." "Well, now I need you to overstep," I said firmly. "Walk me through what I should do." For the next hour, Grace guided me through a thorough audit of my finances. We found evidence of dozens of unauthorized transfers dating back nearly 18 months. We discovered credit card accounts opened in my name that I'd never seen. Most disturbingly, we found mortgage refinance paperwork on my house, with Eric listed as the primary borrower and me as the co-signer, documents I had no memory of signing. "This looks like forgery, Martha," Grace said gravely. "Or at the very least, he had you sign papers without explaining what they really were." I remembered Eric bringing over documents last Thanksgiving, claiming they were just routine updates to my will and power of attorney. I'd signed without reading carefully, trusting my only child implicitly. "What do I do now?" I asked, a strange calm replacing my initial shock. "First, secure what's left," Grace advised. "Change all your passwords, remove Eric's access to every account, then call your bank's fraud department and your attorney." "And after that?" I asked. Grace hesitated. "That depends on what you want, Martha. This could be a criminal matter if you choose to pursue it that way." I glanced at my computer screen, still open to Vanessa's smiling face as she posed in front of the Eiffel Tower, using the occasion of my birthday as a hashtag to justify their luxury trip. "What I want," I said slowly, "is for them to understand exactly what they've done, not just to my finances, but to my trust." After hanging up with Grace, I spent the next 3 hours making calls to my bank, to my investment company, to the credit card companies where accounts had been opened in my name. I changed every password, revoked all authorized users, and placed fraud alerts on my credit report. Then I called Henry Matthews, my attorney and a longtime family friend. "Martha," he greeted me warmly. "I was going to call with birthday wishes. How are you?" "I've been better, Henry," I replied. "I need your help with something urgent. How quickly can you freeze a home equity line of credit?" By late afternoon, I had regained control of all my accounts and blocked any further access. Henry had also discovered something particularly troubling. Eric had taken out a $50,000 home equity line of credit on my house just 2 weeks ago, with nearly all of it already withdrawn. As I sat at my kitchen table reviewing all I'd learned, a notification popped up on my phone. Another Facebook post from Vanessa. "Dinner reservations at Le Jules Verne in the Eiffel Tower tonight. Starting this vacation in style. Living your best life." I zoomed in on the image. Vanessa was holding a credit card, posing as she handed it to the waiter. It was a distinctive platinum color I recognized immediately. The premium card opened in my name 6 months ago. That's when I knew exactly what I needed to do. With steady hands, I picked up my phone and dialed the international number for the Ritz Paris. "Bonjour, Ritz Paris. Comment puis-je vous aider?" came the polished voice on the other end. "Yes, hello," I replied calmly. "I need to speak with someone about a fraudulent credit card being used by guests at your hotel." Before we continue with Martha's plan, I want to invite you to join our exclusive story group where you'll have access to special stories like this one without any ads. You can even listen offline. Just check out the first pinned comment below. Now let's get back to see what Martha does next. "Madam Campbell, I understand your concern, but we must follow certain protocols in these situations," the Ritz Paris financial manager explained in accented English. "If you are claiming the card is being used fraudulently, We will need to verify your identity before taking any action. Of course, I replied, sitting straighter in my kitchen chair. I have all the necessary information. For the next 15 minutes, I provided everything they requested: my full name, billing address, the card number, security code, and answers to security questions. With each verification, I felt a strange mix of anger and vindication. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine. "Thank you for your patience, Madame Campbell," the manager finally said. "We have confirmed that you are indeed the card holder of record. The guests in question, Monsieur and Madame Campbell, checked in earlier today for a 5-night stay in one of our deluxe suites." I nearly choked. A 5-night stay in a deluxe suite at the Ritz Paris would cost more than I'd spent on an entire month's living expenses. "I understand they have dinner reservations at Le Jules Verne this evening," I continued. "I assume that's being charged to the room as well?" "Oui, madame, along with spa services scheduled for tomorrow morning and a private tour of the Louvre." My hands tightened around the phone. The audacity was breathtaking. "Here's what I need you to do," I said, my teacher voice emerging, the tone I'd used for 30 years when students needed clear boundaries. "I am reporting this card as stolen. I want you to cancel it immediately in your system and decline any further charges." "Certainly, madame." "And regarding their current accommodations?" I considered my options carefully. Part of me wanted to have them ejected from the hotel immediately, their belongings unceremoniously deposited on the sidewalk. But a more measured approach would be more effective and more satisfying in the long run. "Please allow them to return from dinner," I decided. "Then inform them that there's an issue with their payment method and all additional hotel privileges, room service, spa, concierge services, are suspended until a valid form of payment is provided." "As you wish, madame. And if they attempt to provide another card?" "Check the name carefully," I instructed. "Accept only cards issued in their names, not mine." After finishing with the Ritz, I made similar calls to American Express, Visa, and MasterCard, reporting every card opened in my name as fraudulent and requesting immediate cancellation. By the time I finished, every credit line Eric and Vanessa might access under my name had been cut off. But I wasn't done yet. My next call was to their airline. This proved more challenging. Airlines have stricter privacy policies, but after explaining the situation and providing verification of the fraudulent charges, I managed to have their return tickets canceled. The first-class journey home they'd booked for next week no longer existed. By early evening, I'd systematically dismantled their entire European vacation finance structure. The only money they would have access to would be whatever cash they'd brought along or funds from accounts actually belonging to them, which, based on what I knew of their finances, wouldn't get them very far in Paris. I made one final call to the credit monitoring service recommended by Grace and set up alerts for any new accounts or inquiries made in my name. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. It was just after midnight when my phone rang. The screen displayed Eric's name, the international call connecting from France. It would be around 9 p.m. in Paris. They'd likely just returned from their extravagant dinner to find their first surprise. I let it ring 4 times, using the moments to compose myself, then answered. "Hello, Mom?" Eric's voice held a note of confusion I'd never heard before. "There's some kind of problem with the hotel. They're saying the credit card was canceled. There must be some mistake." I took a slow sip of wine before responding. "No mistake, Eric. I canceled it." A beat of silence. "You... what? Why would you do that?" "Because it's my credit card, Eric. One I never applied for or authorized." "Mom, I can explain. We were going to surprise you with this trip. It's why we couldn't make your birthday dinner. We're going to bring you back something amazing from Paris." The desperate lie formed in real time, his voice rising slightly in pitch. "That's interesting," I replied calmly. "Because according to Vanessa's Facebook posts, this trip was planned using Martha's birthday week as an excuse to treat yourselves. Not exactly a surprise for me, was it?" Another pause, longer this time. I could hear muffled conversation in the background, Eric covering the phone to consult with Vanessa. "Look, Mom, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. We can sort this out when we get home. But right now, we're in a foreign country and staying at the Ritz Paris," I finished for him. "In a deluxe suite that costs over 2,000 euros per night, charged to a credit card in my name that I never approved, just like the first-class airfare, just like the dinner at the Eiffel Tower tonight, just like the spa treatment scheduled for tomorrow." "Mom, No, Eric. I've spent today discovering exactly how you've been financing your lifestyle. The unauthorized transfers from my accounts, the credit cards opened in my name, the home equity line of credit on my house. My voice remained steady, even as I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek, all while I sat alone at my birthday dinner last night. Vanessa's voice suddenly came on the line. Martha, you're overreacting. Eric was just helping manage your finances since you're getting older. Everything was done for your benefit. My benefit? I couldn't contain a short, bitter laugh. How exactly does draining my retirement account benefit me, Vanessa? How does maxing out credit cards in my name help me? Please, enlighten me. We were going to pay it all back, she insisted, her usual polish cracking under pressure. Eric's due for a promotion, and my yoga studio is about to turn the corner. The same promotion you've mentioned for the past 3 years? The same yoga studio that's been about to turn the corner since it opened? I shook my head, though they couldn't see it. No more lies, please. Not tonight. Eric came back on the line, his voice now desperate. Mom, please, we're stranded here. The hotel says we have to provide another form of payment by morning or check out. All our cards are being declined. We don't have enough cash for another hotel, let alone to get home. That sounds like a difficult situation, I said, surprised by my own composure. Perhaps this is a good opportunity to practice the financial responsibility you've avoided for so long. What's that supposed to mean? His voice had an edge now, the entitled anger I'd glimpsed occasionally, but always excused. It means I've spent the past 20 years rescuing you from the consequences of your choices, Eric. Not anymore. So you're just going to leave us stranded in Paris? The disbelief in his voice was almost comical. Your own son. My own son who stole from me, I corrected quietly. My own son who forged my signature, drained my accounts, and skipped my birthday dinner to fly first class on my dime. Mom, I've taken control of all my accounts and reported the fraud, I continued. Your return tickets have been canceled. The line of credit on my house has been frozen. This is the reality you've created, Eric. Now you'll need to find your own way home. You can't do this. Vanessa's voice again, shrill with panic. We're your family. Yes, you are, I agreed, my voice finally breaking slightly, which is why this betrayal hurts so deeply. We'll be completely stranded, Eric said, his tone shifting to one I recognized all too well, the guilt trip that had worked so effectively for years. Is that what you want for your only child? I closed my eyes, steeling myself against decades of maternal instinct. What I want is for my only child to understand that actions have consequences. What I want is for both of you to experience the reality of your choices. What I want is for you to find your way home without my money for once. And how exactly are we supposed to do that? Vanessa demanded. You're both intelligent, resourceful adults, I replied. I'm sure you'll figure something out. After all, you managed to orchestrate an elaborate financial fraud against your own mother. Booking economy flights home should be well within your capabilities. With that, I ended the call and turned off my phone. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or uncertainty, from the release of speaking my truth after years of enabling their behavior. Outside my kitchen window, the first light of dawn was beginning to break. I'd been up all night, dismantling the financial house of cards my son had built, using my name and trust as its foundation. Tomorrow would bring more calls from Eric and Vanessa, more desperate pleas and angry accusations. There would be difficult conversations with my bank, my attorney, and possibly even law enforcement. But for now, in the quiet of my kitchen as a new day began, I felt something unexpected: freedom. The burden of being their safety net, their silent sponsor, their eternal backup plan had been lifted. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first, and it felt right. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this video and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and how old you are. I'd love to know who's following Martha's journey of reclaiming her power. By the time I turned my phone back on the following afternoon, I had 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 4 voicemails, all from Eric and Vanessa. Their messages evolved from angry demands to desperate pleas to manipulative guilt trips. How could you do this to your own son? Eric, 3:17 a.m. We're going to miss our private tour of the Louvre. Vanessa, 7:42 a.m. The hotel is threatening to call the police if we don't pay. Eric, 9:20 a.m. Is this how you want to be remembered as a mother? Vanessa, 11:05 a.m. The last message gave me pause. How did I want to be remembered as a mother? As someone who continued enabling destructive behavior? Or as someone who loved her child enough to finally let him face the consequences of his actions? Rather than responding to any of their messages, I called Grace, who had just returned from New Zealand. "They've been trying to reach me nonstop," I told her after explaining what had happened. "Part of me wonders if I've gone too far." "Martha," Grace said firmly, "what they did was financial abuse. They exploited your trust and stole from you. This isn't about a missed birthday dinner. It's about years of manipulation and theft. But they're stranded in Paris. They're adults in one of the most well-connected cities in the world," Grace countered. "They have options. They could contact the American embassy. They could ask friends for help. They could sell some of those designer items Vanessa is always flaunting on social media." I sighed, recognizing the truth in her words, but still feeling the pull of maternal concern. "I've never stood firm with Eric before. It feels unnatural." "Of course it does," Grace said gently. "You've spent his entire life putting his needs before your own. But Martha, you deserve better than being treated like an ATM. And honestly, Eric deserves the chance to solve his own problems." After our call, I steeled myself and listened to the voicemails. The latest one, from just an hour ago, caught my attention. Eric's voice sounded different, less entitled, more subdued. "Mom, I don't know if you're listening to these messages. We managed to get a cheaper hotel for tonight. The American Express travel office helped us book economy flights home for tomorrow, using Vanessa's emergency credit card that was almost maxed out. We'll be home on Thursday. I know you're angry, and maybe you have reason to be. We need to talk when I get back, please." I played it twice, trying to gauge his sincerity. Was this genuine remorse, or just another manipulation? After years of making excuses for his behavior, I found it difficult to trust my judgment where Eric was concerned. The next morning, I met with Henry at his law office to discuss my options. "The evidence of fraud is substantial," Henry explained, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "Unauthorized credit applications, forged signatures, transfers without consent. You have every right to pursue criminal charges." The word criminal made my stomach clench. "I don't want Eric to go to jail, Henry. I just want him to understand what he's done and make amends." Henry leaned back in his chair, regarding me thoughtfully. "Then let's discuss alternatives. We can draft a formal repayment agreement, legally binding, with consequences for default. We can require financial counseling as a condition. We can establish a structured path to rebuilding trust without involving the criminal justice system." "Could we freeze any further legal action while we attempt this approach?" I asked. "We can," Henry confirmed. "But Martha, you need to be prepared for the possibility that Eric won't comply. His patterns of behavior suggest someone who doesn't believe rules apply to him." "I know," I admitted, "but I have to try." On Thursday morning, I was weeding my garden when a taxi pulled up in front of my house. Eric and Vanessa emerged, looking decidedly less polished than in their social media photos. Their designer luggage had been replaced with what looked like cheap duffel bags, and the confident posture they typically affected was nowhere to be seen. I continued weeding, watching from the corner of my eye as they approached hesitantly. "Mom?" Eric called from the edge of the garden. I looked up, shading my eyes against the morning sun. "Hello, Eric. Vanessa, can we talk?" he asked, shifting uncomfortably. "I think that's necessary, yes." I removed my gardening gloves and stood, brushing soil from my knees. "Come inside." In my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd discovered their deception just days earlier, I poured 3 glasses of water and sat across from them at the table. Up close, they looked exhausted. Vanessa's carefully maintained appearance had suffered. Her nail polish was chipped, her hair unstyled. Eric hadn't shaved in days. "Your flight home wasn't first class, I take it?" I couldn't help asking. Eric winced. "No, we were in the last row, middle seats next to the bathroom. A humbling experience, I'm sure." Vanessa, typically quick with a retort, remained uncharacteristically silent, her eyes fixed on her water glass. "Mom," Eric began, "what happened in Paris?" "Didn't begin in Paris," I interrupted. "What happened in Paris was simply the consequence of decisions you've been making for years." He nodded slowly. "I know, and we owe you an explanation." "I think you owe me more than that," I said evenly. "But an explanation would be a start." Eric exchanged a glance with Vanessa before continuing. "It started small. A transfer here and there when we were short on rent. using your credit card for an emergency repair. But it worked so easily that he trailed off, seemingly unable to articulate the progression of their deception. That you decided to just keep going, I finished for him. To forge my signature on loan documents, to open credit accounts in my name, to systematically drain the retirement savings your father spent decades building. Eric's face flushed with shame. Yes, and my birthday dinner? The one you canceled to fly to Paris? At this, Vanessa finally spoke. That was my idea, she admitted quietly. We'd already booked the trip using the equity line on your house. We needed an excuse to leave town before you might notice the withdrawal. The calculated nature of their actions stung afresh, so my birthday was just an inconvenient timing issue for your theft. Neither of them contradicted me. How much? I asked. In total, how much have you taken from me? Eric looked up, his expression pained. Just over $160,000. The number hung in the air between us. $160,000. More than 5 years of my teaching salary when I was working. Money that represented security for my remaining years. I've spoken with my attorney, I said after a long moment. He's prepared the paperwork for a formal repayment agreement. You'll both sign it, acknowledging the debt and agreeing to specific terms for repayment. Mom, we can't possibly, Eric began. You'll also attend financial counseling, I continued as if he hadn't spoken, and provide me with monthly documentation of your expenses and income. Every penny you've taken will be accounted for and repaid. And if we refuse? Vanessa asked, a hint of her usual defiance returning. I met her gaze steadily. Then I'll file criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. The evidence is overwhelming, as I'm sure you're aware. The color drained from her face. You wouldn't. I canceled your Paris vacation from my kitchen table in the middle of the night, I reminded her. Don't test my resolve. Eric reached across the table, his hand stopping short of touching mine. Mom, we'll sign whatever you want, but we can't possibly pay back that much money. We don't have it. You had it when you were spending it, I pointed out. You'll have it again when you start living within your means and making restitution a priority. What about our apartment? Our car payments? He asked, genuine panic edging into his voice. Those are questions for your financial counselor, I replied. But I imagine you'll need to make some significant lifestyle changes, perhaps downsizing to a smaller apartment, selling the luxury car you can't afford, canceling the country club membership. Vanessa's head snapped up. That's not fair. We have a certain standard of living to maintain. Your friends aren't paying your bills, I cut in. Or rather, I'm not paying your bills anymore so you can impress your friends. Eric shot Vanessa a warning look before turning back to me. When do we need to sign this agreement? Henry is drawing up the papers now. We'll meet at his office tomorrow at 10. I stood, indicating that our conversation was over for now. I suggest you both take the day to consider exactly how you want to proceed. This is a crossroads moment. As they rose to leave, Eric hesitated. Where are we supposed to go? We can't get into our apartment until the landlord returns our calls, and our keys were, we had to leave some things behind in Paris as collateral. For a brief moment, my resolve wavered. They looked so lost, so unlike the confident couple who'd flaunted their first-class lifestyle just days ago. But then I remembered sitting alone at my birthday dinner while they drank champagne at my expense. I believe there's a Holiday Inn off the interstate, I said, keeping my voice neutral. It's within your actual budget. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, emotions warring within me. Had I been too harsh? Not harsh enough? Was I helping Eric grow up, or merely punishing him for hurting me? I had no answers, only the certainty that continuing as we had been, with me enabling their financial irresponsibility, would destroy us all in the end. My phone chimed with a text from Henry. Papers ready for tomorrow. You're doing the right thing, Martha. I hoped he was right, because despite the anger and betrayal I felt, one truth remained constant. I loved my son. And sometimes, loving someone means being strong enough to let them face the consequences of their actions, no matter how painful that might be for both of you. This is rock bottom, I whispered to myself, and the only way from rock bottom is up. The following morning, I arrived at Henry's office 15 minutes early, my hands clenched tightly around my purse. Despite my resolve, anxiety gnawed at me. What if Eric and Vanessa didn't show up? What if they hired their own lawyer to fight me? What if this permanent rift between us was the price of my self-respect? Martha, Henry greeted me warmly, emerging from his office. You look like you haven't slept. Is it that obvious? I attempted a smile. I kept replaying yesterday's conversation in my head, wondering if I'm doing the right thing. Henry guided me into his office, closing the door behind us. Second thoughts are normal. But remember why we're here. This isn't punitive, it's restorative. You're giving Eric a chance to make things right without the intervention of the criminal justice system. I nodded, drawing strength from his reassurance. Have you heard from them? No, but he was interrupted by his receptionist's voice on the intercom. Mr. and Mrs. Campbell are here, sir. My heart jumped. They came. Eric and Vanessa entered looking marginally better than the day before. They'd clearly showered and changed clothes, but the strain of the past week showed in the shadows beneath their eyes and the tension in their postures. Thank you for coming, Henry began, gesturing for them to sit across from us at the conference table. I've prepared the documentation we discussed, Martha. Before we proceed, I should ask if you've consulted an attorney? He directed this to Eric and Vanessa. We can't afford an attorney, Vanessa replied tersely. I see. Henry placed a thick folder on the table. Then I need to advise you that while I'm preparing these documents at Martha's request, I represent her interests in this matter, not yours. You have the right to independent legal counsel before signing. We understand, Eric said. Let's just get this over with. Henry opened the folder and explained the contents methodically. This is a legally binding agreement acknowledging the debt of $163,457.82 to Martha Campbell. It includes a repayment schedule of $2,000 per month for 84 months, with a balloon payment at the end to cover the remaining balance. Interest will accrue at 3% annually, significantly lower than you'd receive from any commercial lender. Eric's eyes widened. $2,000 a month? That's impossible on our income. Which is why the agreement also includes requirements for financial counseling and lifestyle adjustments, Henry continued. Martha is being exceedingly generous here. She could demand immediate repayment of the full amount, which would likely force you into bankruptcy. We'll lose our apartment, Vanessa whispered, more to Eric than to us. That seems likely, Henry acknowledged. The financial counselor will help you find housing within your actual means. What about our careers? Eric asked. I could lose my position at the bank if this becomes public. Financial institutions don't look kindly on employees who commit fraud. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on any of us. This agreement includes a confidentiality clause, Henry explained. Martha has no interest in damaging your professional reputation. However, the alternative, criminal charges, would certainly become public record. As Henry continued outlining the terms, I watched my son's face. Each new requirement, monthly financial disclosures, restrictions on new credit applications, mandatory counseling sessions, seemed to chip away at his facade until the entitled young man was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, a person confronting the reality of his actions for perhaps the first time. There's one more document, Henry said, sliding a separate paper across the table. This concerns the home equity line of credit taken out against Martha's house. Eric, you'll need to sign this transfer of obligation, accepting full responsibility for that debt. Eric stared at the document. But that's another $50,000. Money you took, I reminded him quietly. Money currently secured by my home. If I sign all this, he said slowly, what happens next? You begin making restitution, Henry explained. You work with the financial counselor to develop a sustainable budget. You rebuild trust with your mother through transparency and consistent follow-through. And most importantly, you avoid criminal prosecution for multiple felonies. Eric looked at me directly for the first time since entering the office. And our relationship? What happens to that? The vulnerability in his question caught me off guard. Despite everything, he was still my son. The little boy who'd once brought me dandelions from the yard, the teenager who'd struggled after his father died, the young man who'd made me proud at his college graduation. Somewhere beneath the entitlement and deception, that person still existed. That depends on you, I answered truthfully, on whether these signatures represent genuine commitment to change or just another manipulation to avoid consequences. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded and reached for the pen. One by one, they signed each document. With each signature, I felt both relief and sadness. Relief that they were accepting responsibility. Sadness that our relationship had deteriorated to the point where legal agreements were necessary between mother and son. When the final paper was signed, Henry gathered the documents and excused himself to make copies, leaving the three of us alone in uncomfortable silence. "What about the criminal charges?" Vanessa finally asked. "Are they off the table now?" "As long as you comply with the agreement, yes," I confirmed. "But any default, any new attempt to access my finances, and I'll have no choice but to move forward legally." Eric rubbed his face wearily. "We're going to need help, Mom, not money," he clarified quickly, seeing my expression harden. "But guidance. We don't know how to live differently. We've been operating this way for so long." His admission of ignorance, rather than malice, softened something in me. "That's why the agreement includes counseling. There are people who can help you learn what I should have taught you years ago." "What's that?" he asked. "That financial security comes from living within your means, not pretending to be richer than you are." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "Your father and I never had designer clothes or luxury vacations. We saved. We invested carefully. We built security slowly, brick by brick. That's how real wealth is created, not through credit cards and loans, but through patience and discipline." Vanessa looked down at her designer watch, a purchase I'd probably unknowingly funded. "I don't know if I can live like that," she admitted softly. "Then you have decisions to make," I replied, not unkindly. "Both of you do." Henry returned with copies for everyone, and the meeting concluded with handshakes that felt more like a business transaction than a family reconciliation. As they prepared to leave, Eric hesitated at the door. "Mom, where do we go from here? I mean, do we still talk? Do we see each other?" The question broke my heart a little. Despite everything, he was still seeking connection, still wanting reassurance that he hadn't completely destroyed our relationship. "We start small," I said after a moment's consideration. "Maybe coffee next week, after your first counseling session. We can talk about how it went." Relief flickered across his face. "I'd like that." After they left, Henry settled behind his desk with a satisfied expression. "That went better than expected. No histrionics, no last-minute refusals. They were surprisingly compliant," I agreed. "Though I wonder how long it will last once the reality of their new financial situation sets in." "That's why the agreement includes graduated consequences for non-compliance," Henry reminded me. "But Martha, I think you should prepare yourself for the possibility that they might not succeed. Changing entrenched financial behaviors is exceedingly difficult, especially for someone like Eric who's never experienced real consequences before." "I know," I sighed, "but I have to give him the chance to try." Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in days. The path forward wouldn't be easy, for any of us, but at least there was a path. At least there was hope that my son might learn from this experience, might grow into the responsible adult I'd failed to raise him to be. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone pinged with a text message from an unknown number. Opening it, I found a photo of a "For Rent" sign, with Vanessa's manicured hand giving a thumbs up in the foreground. The caption read, "First appointment with the financial counselor set for Monday. Looking at more affordable housing options today. Thank you for the second chance." It was signed with both their names, but clearly sent from Vanessa's phone. A tentative first step, perhaps, or another manipulation. Only time would tell. But as I entered my home, the home I'd now secured from their financial exploitation, I allowed myself to feel cautiously optimistic. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that transform us most profoundly. And sometimes a ruined vacation is exactly what someone needs to finally face reality. If you're enjoying this journey of empowerment and accountability, please hit that subscribe button and share this story with someone who might need a reminder about setting healthy boundaries. Don't forget to like this video too. The first payment arrived exactly 1 month after the signing. I hadn't expected it. Not really. Despite the legally binding agreement, part of me had been bracing for excuses, delays, or outright default. When the bank notification appeared on my phone showing a transfer of exactly $2,000 from Eric's account to mine, I had to sit down, overcome by conflicting emotions. "They actually paid," I told Grace over coffee later that day. "On time, the full amount." "That's encouraging," she said, though I could hear the cautious note in her voice. "Have you spoken with them since the meeting at Henry's office?" "We had coffee last week after their first counseling session," I replied, stirring my latte absently. It was awkward. Eric kept looking at me like he was waiting for me to yell at him, and Vanessa barely spoke at all. "What did you talk about?" "The counseling, mostly. They've been assigned to work with Dr. Marshall, you remember her? The financial therapist who spoke at that retirement seminar last year? She's having them document every penny they spend and track their emotional state when making purchases. Grace nodded approvingly. That's an excellent approach. Forces them to confront the psychological aspects of their spending habits. Eric said it's been eye-opening, I continued. Apparently they were spending over $500 a month just on coffee shops and casual dining. Things they never even thought about. And the apartment situation? They found a one-bedroom in a less prestigious neighborhood, half the rent of their luxury place. They're moving next weekend. I hesitated, then added, They asked if I would help. Grace's eyebrows shot up. And you said? I said I'd bring lunch for everyone but wouldn't be doing any heavy lifting. I smiled ruefully. Small steps, right? The moving day arrived with perfect fall weather, crisp and sunny, ideal for the physical labor ahead. I arrived at Eric and Vanessa's luxury apartment building for the last time, carrying bags from a local sandwich shop. The contrast between this visit and my previous ones was striking. Before, I'd always been ushered in quickly, shown the latest expensive purchase or renovation, then subtly maneuvered into opening my checkbook for some temporary emergency. Today, the pretense was gone. The apartment was in disarray, moving boxes stacked haphazardly, designer furniture tagged with colorful stickers indicating what would be sold, what would be kept, what would be placed in storage. Mom, you came, Eric greeted me, genuine surprise in his voice despite our prior arrangement. He was wearing old jeans and a faded t-shirt, clothing I hadn't seen him in for years. I said I would, I replied, holding up the lunch bags. Where should I put these? Kitchen counter's the only clear space, he said, leading me through the chaos. Vanessa's friend Jen is helping, and Tyler from my office brought his truck. In the kitchen, Vanessa was wrapping glasses in newspaper, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked younger, somehow, more vulnerable. Martha, she acknowledged me with a nod. Thank you for lunch. You're welcome. I set the bags down and began unpacking sandwiches and chips. How's the packing going? It's illuminating, she replied after a moment. Do you know we have 17 wine glasses? 17, for two people who almost never entertain. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her self-awareness. Aspirational purchasing? Dr. Marshall's term, exactly, Vanessa said with a hint of a smile. We've been buying for the life we wanted people to think we had, not the life we actually lived. Before I could respond, a young woman appeared in the doorway, presumably Jen, Vanessa's friend. The consignment shop guy is here to look at the furniture, she announced. Vanessa excused herself, leaving me alone with Eric in the kitchen. This can't be easy for her, I observed, watching Vanessa through the doorway as she spoke with the consignment dealer. Eric shook his head. It's not, but she's trying. We both are. He unwrapped a sandwich and took a bite, chewing thoughtfully before continuing. Dr. Marshall says Vanessa's spending was driven by deep insecurity. She grew up poor, like food stamps and secondhand clothes poor. Her worth was always tied to appearances. This was new information. In all the years they'd been together, Vanessa had never shared details of her childhood with me. She'd always presented herself as coming from a background similar to Eric's, comfortable, middle class, stable. And you? I asked. What's driving your financial behavior? He considered the question seriously. Fear of disappointing people, of not measuring up, of failing. He met my gaze directly, of not being the son you and Dad deserved. The irony was painful. So you resolved that fear by stealing from me? Eric winced. When you put it that way, I know it sounds twisted. Dr. Marshall says I was trying to maintain a facade of success because I thought that's what would make you proud. That somehow I convinced myself the end justified the means. And now? Now I know that true success isn't about appearances. He set down his sandwich. Mom, I've been offered a demotion at the bank. What? This was unexpected. I thought the agreement protected your job. It did, from legal consequences. But I confessed everything to my supervisor. The fraud, the theft, all of it. I couldn't keep living a lie, especially working in a position of financial trust. I was stunned. That was remarkably honest of you. It was terrifying, he admitted. I almost threw up in his office. But Dr. Marshall said we needed to clear all the secrets if we were going to rebuild our lives on a foundation of truth. And they didn't fire you? Surprisingly, no. They're moving me to a non-client-facing position in the operations department. Significant pay cut, of course, but it allows me to keep my benefits and continue making the restitution payments. I studied my son's face, looking for signs of the entitled young man who jetted off to Paris on my dime. Instead, I saw someone humbled, frightened, but also strangely resolute. "I'm proud of you for doing that," I said finally. "It couldn't have been easy." Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, perhaps. "Really? You're not disappointed?" "In your past actions, yes. In the steps you're taking now? No." I reached across the counter and briefly squeezed his hand. "This is what growing up looks like, Eric. Facing consequences, making amends, rebuilding with honesty." The moment was interrupted by Tyler calling from the other room, needing help with a heavy cabinet. Eric excused himself, and I found myself alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the half-packed remnants of their former lifestyle. On the refrigerator door, held by a magnet, was a handwritten budget. The kind I'd tried to teach Eric about when he was in college, the kind he'd always dismissed as unnecessary. Next to it hung a simple chart tracking their debt reduction progress, with the largest entry being the amount owed to me. I felt a complicated mix of emotions: sadness for the pain and difficulty they were facing, anger still simmering beneath the surface for their betrayal, but also, unexpectedly, a spark of hope. These modest papers on the refrigerator represented something real, not the glossy facade of expensive vacations and designer clothes, but the unglamorous reality of fiscal responsibility. Later, as everyone gathered around the kitchen counter for lunch, I observed the easy camaraderie between Eric, Vanessa, and their friends. They joked about the mountain of boxes still to be packed, debated the merits of various pizza places near their new apartment, and shared stories of their own moving disasters. It was relaxed, genuine interaction, something I realized I'd rarely seen from them before. "We're having a housewarming next month," Vanessa mentioned during a lull in the conversation. "Nothing fancy, just pizza and BYOB. Would you like to come, Martha?" The invitation was tentative, clearly weighted with our complicated history. The old Vanessa would have hosted an elaborate catered affair, insisted on expensive wines, and subtly found ways to make me feel out of place in their sophisticated world. This simple pizza gathering in a modest apartment represented a fundamental shift. "I'd like that," I replied, meeting her gaze directly. "Thank you for inviting me." As the afternoon progressed, I found myself doing more than just providing lunch. I wrapped dishes, labeled boxes, and even helped Vanessa sort through her extensive wardrobe, deciding what to keep and what to sell. "I can't believe I spent $300 on this blouse," she murmured, holding up a silk top with the tag still attached. "I've never even worn it." "Why did you buy it?" I asked, genuinely curious. She considered the question. "Because the woman who led my yoga training program had one similar. I thought if I dressed like her, I'd somehow be like her. More successful, more centered." She shook her head, placing the blouse in the sell pile. "It sounds so foolish saying it out loud." "Not foolish," I corrected gently. "Human. We all want to belong, to be respected." Vanessa looked at me with surprise. "I thought you'd hate me after everything we did." "I was angry," I acknowledged. "Still am in some ways. But hate? No. I've spent too many years as a teacher to believe people can't change, can't learn from their mistakes." "Even big mistakes?" she asked quietly. "Especially big mistakes. Those are often the best teachers." I folded a sweater and placed it in a box. "The question is whether you're willing to learn the lesson." By evening, the apartment was nearly emptied, with most of their possessions either packed for moving or tagged for the consignment shop. As I prepared to leave, Eric walked me to my car. "Thank you for coming today," he said, hands shoved in his pockets like he used to do as a teenager when he was nervous. It meant a lot. "It was illuminating," I replied, echoing Vanessa's earlier word. "Mom." He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I know we have a long way to go to rebuild your trust, but I want you to know we're committed to making this right. Not just the money, but everything." The streetlights flickered on as dusk settled around us. In their glow, I could see both the man he was becoming and the boy he had been. My son, flawed and struggling, but trying. "One day at a time," I said, opening my car door. "That's all any of us can do." As I drove home, I reflected on the strange journey we'd begun. The hurt wasn't gone. Trust couldn't be restored in a single day of packing boxes and eating sandwiches. But something had shifted. The wall of resentment I'd built since that solitary birthday dinner felt a little less solid, a little more permeable. My phone pinged with a text from Eric. "Thanks again for today. We couldn't have done it without you." Such a simple message, yet so different from the entitled demands and manipulative guilt trips I'd grown accustomed to receiving from him. Perhaps destroying their Parisian vacation had accomplished what years of enabling never could. It had forced them to grow up. Small steps, indeed, but in the right direction. 3 months after Eric and Vanessa's disastrous Paris vacation, I sat in the community room of our local library, nervously arranging chairs in a circle. The clock showed 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes until the first meeting of what I'd tentatively named Financial Boundaries, a support group for parents of financially dependent adult children. The idea had come to me gradually as I processed my own experience. First, as a fleeting thought during a therapy session. Yes, I'd started seeing someone to work through my complicated feelings about Eric's betrayal. Then as a more concrete possibility after a chance encounter at the grocery store with Irene Sullivan, whose son's gambling addiction had nearly bankrupted her. By the time I mentioned it to Grace, the concept had solidified enough that she immediately offered to help organize it. "Do you think anyone will actually come?" I asked her now, as she arranged refreshments on a side table. "Martha, when we posted the flyer on the community board, the library had to print extras because people kept taking them," she reminded me. "There are more parents in this situation than you realize." She was right. By 7:05, every chair was filled. 15 people ranging in age from early 60s to late 70s, some looking nervous, others determined, all carrying the unmistakable weariness of those who've been supporting adult children for far too long. I cleared my throat and began. "Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Martha Campbell, and I started this group because, well, 3 months ago, I discovered my son and daughter-in-law had taken over $160,000 from me through unauthorized transfers and fraudulent credit applications." A murmur of recognition rippled through the room. Not shock, recognition. "The hardest part wasn't the financial loss," I continued. "It was realizing that by continuously rescuing my son from the consequences of his choices, I'd helped create the very problem I was now facing. I'd enabled behavior that ultimately harmed both of us." Heads nodded around the circle. "So this group is for sharing experiences, strategies, and support as we navigate the challenging terrain of loving our adult children while establishing healthy financial boundaries. Would anyone like to share their story?" A silver-haired man in a cardigan raised his hand. "I'm Howard. My daughter is 43 years old and has never paid her own rent. Not once in 22 years. My wife and I have remortgaged our house twice to keep her afloat." A woman across the circle sighed in recognition. "I'm Patricia. My son is living in my basement at 38. He has a master's degree in engineering but hasn't held a job for more than 6 months. I'm depleting my retirement account to cover his student loans." One by one, they shared their stories, tales of manipulation, failed businesses funded by parents' savings, grandchildren's college funds drained to cover adult children's emergencies, retirement dreams deferred or abandoned entirely. The details varied, but the pattern was the same. Adult children who had never learned financial responsibility because their parents had never required it of them. "How did you finally set boundaries?" Patricia asked me. "I've tried cutting my son off before, but I always give in when he talks about being depressed or mentions moving in with some sketchy friends." I shared the story of the Paris vacation, the midnight cancellation of credit cards, the subsequent legal agreement for restitution. The group listened with rapt attention, some looking shocked at my boldness, others nodding in approval. The hardest part, I admitted, was accepting that I wasn't really helping Eric by constantly rescuing him. I was preventing him from developing the skills and resilience he needed as an adult. "Has it worked?" Howard asked skeptically. "Are they actually changing?" "It's a process," I replied honestly. "There have been setbacks. Last month, they missed a financial counseling session and tried to hide it from me. But they've made every payment on time. They're living within their means for the first time. And most importantly, they're starting to take responsibility for their choices." "I couldn't do what you did," an elderly woman named Ruth said softly. "My daughter has 3 children. If I cut her off financially, they would suffer." "That's a real concern," Grace interjected. "But there's a difference between supporting grandchildren directly, perhaps paying for their activities or education funds, and enabling your daughter's financial dependence." The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, far longer than the scheduled meeting time. No one wanted to leave. For many, it was the first time they'd spoken openly about their situations without shame or judgment. By the end, contact information had been exchanged, resources shared, and a decision made to meet weekly rather than monthly, as originally planned. As we stacked chairs after everyone had left, Grace gave me an approving look. "You've started something important here, Martha." "I just provided the space," I demurred. The need was clearly already there. "Don't underestimate what you've done," she insisted. "It takes courage to turn personal pain into community support." On my drive home, I reflected on the evening's conversations. How many parents were silently struggling with these issues, believing they were alone? How many adult children were trapped in cycles of dependence, never developing the skills to stand on their own? My phone rang through my car's speaker system. Eric's number. "Mom?" His voice sounded tense. "Do you have a minute?" My stomach tightened instinctively. In the past, calls like this inevitably led to requests for money. "I'm driving home," I replied cautiously. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, well, sort of." He took an audible breath. "Remember I mentioned that promotion in the operations department might be possible after 6 months of solid performance?" "I remember. My supervisor called me in today, said I've been doing exceptional work and they want to fast-track the promotion. It would mean a significant pay raise." "Eric? That's wonderful news," I exclaimed, genuinely pleased for him. "There's a catch," he continued, the tension returning to his voice. "The position requires a credit check. Given everything that happened, well, my credit is destroyed. I'll fail the check and lose the opportunity." Ah, now I understood the purpose of his call. "And you're hoping I can help somehow?" "Not financially," he clarified quickly. "I was wondering if you'd be willing to write a letter to HR explaining the situation, that I've taken responsibility, am making regular restitution payments, and have maintained perfect financial compliance for 3 months." I paused, considering his request. This wasn't a bailout or an attempt to escape consequences. It was a reasonable request for support in his efforts to rebuild. "I can do that," I said finally. "Send me the HR contact information when you have it." "Thank you," he replied, audible relief in his voice. "How was your evening? Didn't you have that new group meeting tonight?" I was touched that he'd remembered. "It went well. Better than expected, actually. 15 people showed up." "I'm not surprised," Eric said. "What you went through with us, I bet it happens more often than people talk about." "That's exactly what we discovered," I agreed, pulling into my driveway. Everyone thought they were alone in their situation. "Mom?" His voice took on a hesitant quality. "I'm really proud of you for doing this, for taking something painful and using it to help others." The simple sincerity of his statement caught me off guard. "Thank you, Eric. That means a lot." After we hung up, I sat in my car for a moment, oddly moved by our conversation. It was the first time in years that Eric had expressed genuine interest in something I was doing. The first time he'd acknowledged my feelings rather than focusing exclusively on his own needs. Small steps, as I'd come to think of our progress, but meaningful ones. Inside my house, I found an email waiting from the local community college. I'd contacted them weeks ago about the possibility of offering a financial literacy workshop series, drawing on my teaching background and newfound passion for financial education. The response was enthusiastic. They wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss a potential 6-week course for the spring semester. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized that something unexpected had emerged from the ashes of betrayal and disappointment. Purpose, the support group, the potential workshop series, even my evolving relationship with Eric and Vanessa, all of these represented a new chapter I couldn't have anticipated when I sat alone at that birthday dinner just a few months ago. My phone pinged with a final message for the day, a text from Patricia, one of the support group members. "Thank you for tonight. For the first time in years, I don't feel crazy or alone. See you next week." I smiled as I typed my reply. "You're neither crazy nor alone. This is the beginning of change for all of us." Setting down my phone, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. The wound of Eric's betrayal was still healing, the trust still fragile and tentative. But alongside the pain, something new was growing, something stronger and more fulfilling than the unhealthy dynamic we'd maintained for years. Sometimes I reflected as I drifted toward sleep. The most painful experiences become our most powerful teachers. And sometimes, a ruined vacation can be the first step toward a better life, not just for the travelers, but for everyone their journey touches. If you're enjoying this story of resilience and boundaries, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to like this video too. 6 months after my solitary birthday dinner, I awoke to a text message from Vanessa. Could you meet us for coffee at Riverside Cafe at 10:42? Important, but not emergency. Let us know if another time works better. The message was polite, considerate of my schedule, and lacked the demanding tone that had once characterized their communications. Still, I felt a flutter of anxiety. Our relationship, while improved, remained delicate, a tentative reconstruction built on the ruins of broken trust. I replied that I'd be there, then spent the next hour wondering what important but not emergency might mean. Had they decided the repayment plan was too onerous? Were they planning to move away? Was there a health concern? The Riverside Cafe was a modest establishment near their new apartment, nothing like the upscale coffee shops they'd once frequented. When I arrived, Eric and Vanessa were already seated at a corner table, a pot of tea and 3 cups waiting. "Mom, thanks for coming," Eric greeted me with a quick hug, another change from the perfunctory greetings of the past. Vanessa smiled nervously. "We ordered Earl Grey. I remembered it's your favorite." "Thank you," I said, taking a seat and studying their expressions. Both seemed tense but not unhappy. "What's this important matter we need to discuss?" They exchanged glances before Eric reached into his jacket pocket and produced an envelope, sliding it across the table to me. "What's this?" I asked, not reaching for it. "Open it," Vanessa encouraged. "Please." With cautious fingers, I opened the envelope and withdrew a greeting card. On the front was a simple watercolor of a birthday cake with candles. Inside, handwritten in Vanessa's neat script, was a message. "Dear Martha, 6 months ago, we made the worst decision of our lives when we chose a luxury vacation over celebrating your birthday. No apology can erase the hurt we caused, but we hope you'll accept this invitation to a proper celebration. Belated but heartfelt. With love and remorse, Eric and Vanessa." Beneath the message was an invitation to dinner at Antonio's, the Italian restaurant where I'd sat alone on my birthday, for the following Saturday evening. I looked up, genuinely surprised. "This is unexpected. We've been talking about it in our counseling sessions," Eric explained, "about how actions matter more than words when it comes to making amends. Dr. Marshall suggested we think about what we could do to specifically address the birthday dinner we missed," Vanessa added. "Not just the financial aspects of what happened, but the emotional hurt we caused." I ran my fingers over the card, processing their gesture. Part of me, the part still nursing the wound of that solitary dinner, wanted to reject the invitation, to tell them that a belated celebration couldn't possibly make up for their callousness. But another part recognized the genuine effort behind it. "We understand if you don't want to," Eric said, misinterpreting my silence. "It's just, I'll come," I interrupted gently. "Thank you for the invitation." Relief washed over their faces. "There's something else," Vanessa said, reaching into her purse and withdrawing a small notebook. "We've been working on this for a while." She handed me what appeared to be a handmade booklet titled 6 Months of Growth. Inside were photographs, journal entries, and financial records documenting their journey since Paris. The first page showed their new apartment, modest but tastefully arranged with the few quality pieces of furniture they'd kept. Another page displayed their monthly budget with actual spending tracked against projections. There were reflections on lessons learned in counseling, notes on financial goals achieved, even a photo of Eric receiving his promotion certificate. "The last 6 months have been the hardest of our lives," Eric said, as I turned the pages, "but also the most transformative." I paused on an entry written in Vanessa's handwriting. "Today, I realized I've been equating money with love my entire life. My parents couldn't afford the things other kids had, so I felt unloved. As an adult, I spend to feel worthy. Understanding this pattern is the first step to breaking it." The vulnerability of her admission touched me unexpectedly. "Dr. Marshall suggested we create this as a way to track our progress," Vanessa explained, "to remind ourselves how far we've come when we feel discouraged, which happens more often than we'd like to admit," Eric added ruefully. "Living within our means after years of excess. It's like learning to walk again after a lifetime of floating." I continued through the booklet, increasingly moved by their documentation of this difficult journey. The final page contained their repayment record, 6 months of consistent $2,000 payments, reducing their debt to me by $12,000 so far. "We wanted you to have this," Eric said as I closed the booklet, "to show you that what happened in Paris, as painful as it was for everyone, became the wake-up call we desperately needed." I felt tears threatening and took a sip of tea to compose myself. "Thank you for sharing this with me. It clearly represents a lot of hard work and self-reflection." "We're not expecting forgiveness," Vanessa said quietly. "We know trust takes much longer to rebuild than it takes to break, but we wanted you to see that your difficult choice, to hold us accountable rather than rescue us, was the right one. The best gift you ever gave us," Eric added, "was refusing to give us money." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on any of us. We shared a small smile of recognition, the first moment of genuine warmth we'd experienced together, in longer than I could remember. As our conversation continued, they updated me on other developments. Eric's promotion was working out well. Vanessa had started teaching at a community yoga center rather than the exclusive studio she'd once aspired to, a change that brought less income but greater fulfillment. They were considering downsizing further to a studio apartment to accelerate their debt repayment. "We've also started volunteering at a youth financial literacy program," Eric mentioned, "teaching teens basic budgeting skills we wish we'd learned earlier." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely impressed by this initiative. "How did that come about?" "Actually, it was because of your support group," Vanessa admitted. "When Eric told me you were helping other parents set boundaries with financially dependent adult children, it made me think about prevention rather than intervention. If these kids learn financial responsibility early, maybe they won't end up like us." I was touched that my efforts had inspired them in this way. "How's it going?" "Challenging but rewarding," Eric replied. "These kids have no concept of how credit works, how interest compounds, how small daily expenses accumulate. But they're eager to learn, especially when we share our cautionary tale." "You tell them about what happened?" I asked, surprised by their willingness to be so vulnerable. Vanessa nodded. "Not every detail, but the essence. How we got trapped in a cycle of appearance-based spending. How we justified using money that wasn't ours. How it all came crashing down. When we describe being stranded in Paris after our credit cards were canceled, they're riveted." "It's oddly liberating," Eric added. "Owning our mistakes publicly has helped us accept them privately." As we finished our tea, I found myself studying them with new eyes. The superficial polish and performative success that had once defined them was gone, replaced by something more genuine, an earned wisdom that reflected real growth. "We have one more thing to discuss," Eric said, his expression turning serious again. "It's about your birthday dinner on Saturday." "Yes? We've been saving for it," Vanessa explained. "Setting aside a little each week from our strict budget. It won't be extravagant, but it will be completely paid for by us. No credit cards, no loans, no money that isn't truly ours to spend. We want to treat you properly," Eric continued, "but within our actual means. So it won't be the most expensive wine or fancy appetizers, just a simple, honest celebration." The earnestness in their faces as they described their careful planning for a modest dinner touched me far more deeply than any lavish celebration could have. This wasn't about appearances or impressing others. It was about authentic connection and genuine appreciation. "That sounds perfect," I assured them. As I drove home, I reflected on the unexpected gift I'd received. Not the dinner invitation, or even the thoughtful booklet, but the evidence of real transformation. 6 months ago, I'd been devastated by their betrayal and consumed with anger. I couldn't have imagined sitting across from them feeling anything resembling pride. Yet here I was, cautiously proud of their progress, their honesty, their willingness to rebuild from scratch. The road ahead remained long. 7 more years of payments under our agreement, countless more moments of trust to be earned or broken. But for the first time, I truly believed they might complete the journey successfully. That evening, as I prepared for my weekly support group meeting, I added the 6 Months of Growth booklet to my bag. With Eric and Vanessa's permission, I planned to share it with the group as evidence that change was possible. Difficult and painful, certainly, but possible. Howard, the father whose daughter had never paid her own rent, had texted earlier asking if I had any success stories to share. "Some days, I lose hope that anything will ever change," he'd written. "Please tell me all this tough love is worth it." Now I had something concrete to offer him and the others, a glimpse of what might lie on the other side of their difficult boundaries and painful confrontations. Not a perfect resolution, not a fairy tale ending, but authentic growth and genuine accountability. As I gathered my materials for the meeting, my phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Saturday, 7 p.m., birthday dinner at Antonio's. 6 months late, but perhaps right on time in the ways that truly mattered. The best gift, I realized, wasn't the dinner itself, but the transformed people who would be joining me at the table. People who were learning, albeit belatedly, what it meant to give from a place of authenticity rather than appearance, of substance rather than show. Sometimes the most meaningful celebrations aren't the ones with the most expensive trappings, but those that represent genuine milestones on a difficult journey of growth. And sometimes, the best birthday presents arrive not on the day itself, but precisely when they're most needed and most deserved. The night of my belated birthday dinner arrived with a gentle spring rain that left the city streets gleaming under the streetlights. I dressed with unusual care, not in the expensive blue dress I'd worn for my solitary dinner 6 months earlier, but in a simple emerald blouse I'd found at a consignment shop, paired with black trousers and my mother's pearl earrings. As I applied a touch of lipstick, I studied my reflection. The face looking back at me appeared somehow younger than it had 6 months ago, less burdened, more at peace. The angry lines around my mouth had softened. The worry that had perpetually creased my forehead had eased. I arrived at Antonio's precisely at 7, greeted by the same maitre d' who had seated me at my birthday dinner half a year before. If he recognized me as the woman who had dined alone that night, his professional demeanor revealed nothing. "Your party is already seated," he informed me, leading me through the restaurant to a table near the window, not the same table where I'd sat in solitude, but one with a better view of the small garden patio. Eric and Vanessa rose as I approached. I was immediately struck by how different they looked from the polished, image-conscious couple I'd known for years. Eric wore a simple button-down shirt, rather than his usual designer labels. Vanessa's hair was styled naturally, her makeup minimal, her outfit elegant in its simplicity. "Mom, you look beautiful," Eric said, embracing me with genuine warmth. Vanessa handed me a small bouquet of spring flowers. "Happy belated birthday, Martha." As I took my seat, I noticed the table was set with a bottle of sparkling water, rather than the expensive wine they would have once considered essential for any celebration. A single candle flickered in a simple holder at the center. "We made a reservation request," Eric explained, nodding toward the garden. "They've agreed to let us do something special after dinner, weather permitting." Curious but willing to be surprised, I simply nodded and opened my menu. "Everything looks wonderful. We've budgeted for appetizers and main courses," Vanessa said with a slight smile. "But perhaps we should share a dessert." The openness with which she referenced their financial boundaries, once a taboo subject they would have disguised with elaborate excuses, struck me as yet another marker of their growth. "That sounds perfect," I agreed. As we ordered, simple, thoughtful choices rather than the most expensive items on the menu, the conversation flowed with unexpected ease. We discussed the support group, now flourishing with 20 regular members and a waiting list for new participants. Eric shared a breakthrough one of his teenage financial literacy students had experienced. Vanessa described a community yoga program she was developing for seniors on limited incomes. Not once did they hint at financial difficulties, request assistance, or manufacture emergencies requiring my intervention. The constant undercurrent of manipulation that had characterized our interactions for years was notably absent. "We have something to show you," Eric said as we finished our main courses. He withdrew his phone and pulled up a banking app, turning the screen toward me. I looked at the display, momentarily confused. It showed a savings account with a balance of $1,220. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "We call it the Future Security Fund," Vanessa explained. "After paying our bills, making our monthly restitution payment to you, and setting aside our bare minimum living expenses, we put every extra dollar here. It's not much yet," Eric acknowledged, "but it's growing every month. Our goal is to build it to 3 months of living expenses as an emergency fund, then start a retirement account." I was genuinely impressed. That's a significant step. Dr. Marshall says the hardest part of financial recovery isn't making a budget. It's planning for a future you can't see yet, Vanessa said. This account is our way of believing in that future. After we shared a tiramisu for dessert, the same dessert I would have had on my actual birthday had I not canceled the candle, Eric signaled the waiter. "We're ready for the garden now, if that's still possible." The waiter nodded and began clearing our table while Eric turned to me. "There's one more part to this celebration, if you're willing." Intrigued, I followed them through the restaurant's French doors onto the small garden patio, now empty of other diners due to the earlier rain. The space had been transformed with strings of fairy lights reflecting off the damp foliage, creating a magical atmosphere. In the center of the patio stood a small table bearing what appeared to be a birthday cake with unlit candles. "What's this?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "The birthday celebration you should have had," Eric said simply, "complete with cake, candles, and people who truly appreciate you." Vanessa stepped forward with a small wrapped package. "This isn't expensive, but it's from both of us, from our hearts, not our credit cards." With slightly trembling hands, I unwrapped the gift to find a handcrafted wooden frame containing a photograph I'd never seen before. It showed the three of us at Christmas several years earlier, laughing together over some forgotten joke. We looked happy, connected, genuine. A glimpse of what our relationship could be had perhaps once been before money and materialism corrupted it. "Where did you find this?" I asked, touched by the image of better times. "In one of the boxes we packed during the move," Eric explained. "It reminded us of what we're working toward, not just financial solvency, but authentic connection." "We had the frame made by a local artisan," Vanessa added. "It's reclaimed wood from an old barn. The woodworker is a recovering gambling addict who found purpose in craftsmanship. His story resonated with us. The thoughtfulness behind the gift, the meaning rather than the monetary value, moved me deeply. For years, they had given me expensive, impersonal presents purchased with credit cards or, worse, with money stolen from my own accounts. This simple frame, chosen with such care and intention, held more value than all those hollow gifts combined. "It's perfect," I said softly. "Thank you." Eric lit the candles on the cake, exactly 65 of them, creating a blazing miniature inferno that made us all laugh. "Make a wish, Mom," he encouraged. As I looked at their faces, illuminated by candlelight, faces showing genuine care rather than the calculated manipulation I'd grown accustomed to, I realized I didn't need to wish for anything. The transformation I would have wished for was already unfolding before my eyes. I blew out the candles to their applause. Then Eric cut the cake, a simple homemade vanilla creation rather than an elaborate bakery confection. "Did you make this?" I asked, noticing the slightly uneven frosting. Vanessa nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "My first attempt at baking ever. The first one collapsed in the middle, so this is actually version 2. The fact that she had tried, had put in personal effort rather than simply purchasing a solution, spoke volumes about her changing priorities. As we enjoyed the cake, delicious despite its amateur appearance, Eric raised his water glass in a toast. "To second chances," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and to the woman who cared enough to give us one, even when we didn't deserve it. To growth," Vanessa added, "and to the painful lessons that make it possible." I raised my own glass, adding simply, "To authentic celebrations, whenever they happen to occur." As we clinked glasses, I felt something shift inside me, a final release of the hurt and betrayal that had lingered despite months of progress. Not complete forgiveness, perhaps, but acceptance. Acceptance of our imperfect journey, of the damage done and the healing begun, of the reality that relationships, like financial recovery, aren't restored in a single dramatic moment, but through countless small, consistent choices over time. Later, as Eric and Vanessa walked me to my car, the night air fresh from the earlier rain, Eric hesitated, then asked, "Was it okay? The celebration?" "More than okay," I assured him. "It was genuine. That makes it more meaningful than any elaborate party could ever be." "We've been talking about what happens after the debt is fully repaid," Vanessa said, her expression thoughtful. "About 7 years from now, if we stay on schedule." "Oh?" I was surprised they were thinking so far ahead. Eric nodded. "We want to find a way to pay it forward, to help others who are where we were. Maybe establish a scholarship for financial literacy education or contribute to a program that helps families break cycles of financial dysfunction." "That's remarkably forward-thinking," I said, genuinely impressed by this vision that extended beyond their immediate circumstances. "We've been forever changed by this experience," Vanessa replied simply. "It only makes sense that its impact should continue beyond us." As I drove home, the framed photograph on the seat beside me, I reflected on the extraordinary journey we'd taken since that painful birthday 6 months ago. From betrayal to accountability, from entitlement to gratitude, from appearance-based values to authentic connections. The change wasn't complete, of course. Trust remained fragile, requiring continuous reinforcement through consistent actions. The financial damage would take years to repair. Old patterns might resurface under stress or temptation, but tonight had offered a glimpse of possibility, of what might lie at the end of this difficult path if we continued to navigate it with honesty and commitment. Not a perfect relationship, but a healthier one. Not unlimited trust, but earned respect. Not extravagant celebrations, but meaningful connections. As I parked in my driveway, I noticed a text message from Grace. "How was the dinner?" I typed a simple reply. Genuine, for perhaps the first time. Her response came quickly. "The best birthday gift of all." She was right. The truly valuable gifts aren't the ones with the highest price tags, but those that represent genuine care, authentic effort, and meaningful change. My belated birthday celebration had offered me exactly that. Not just a dinner, but a glimpse of the people Eric and Vanessa were becoming. People I could genuinely be proud to call family. If you're enjoying this story of healing and transformation, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to like this video too. "Are you nervous?" Grace asked as we set up chairs in the community college lecture hall. "A little," I admitted, adjusting the projector screen. Public speaking was never my strong suit, even when I was teaching high school English. "You'll be wonderful," she assured me, arranging handouts on a side table. "No one could speak more authentically about this topic than you." Today marked the culmination of a year-long journey that had begun with a solitary birthday dinner and a devastating discovery. The community college's Life Skills for Seniors program had invited me to deliver the keynote address at their financial literacy conference, a full-day event featuring workshops, panel discussions, and resource booths. My support group, now officially recognized as a non-profit organization, had its own table staffed by Howard and Patricia. "Mom, we brought the visual aids," Eric called, entering the lecture hall with Vanessa. They carried poster boards displaying graphs and charts we'd created for my presentation. "Perfect timing," I replied, checking my watch. "The doors open in 20 minutes. As they set up the displays, I marveled at how different they looked from the couple who had jetted off to Paris using my stolen money a year ago. The superficial polish had been replaced by a quiet confidence. They dressed simply but well, carried themselves with dignity rather than pretension, and, most tellingly, lived comfortably within their means. "The budget workshop materials are ready," Vanessa reported, handing me a folder. "We've made 50 copies, but we can run more if needed." "And I confirmed the panel participants for this afternoon," Eric added. "The financial counselor, the debt recovery specialist, and the elder law attorney are all here." I thanked them both, touched by their commitment to this event. What had begun as their court-mandated financial counseling had evolved into genuine passion for helping others avoid the same pitfalls they'd experienced. They now volunteered regularly with both my support group and the Youth Financial Literacy Program, sharing their cautionary tale with refreshing honesty. The past year hadn't been without challenges. They'd experienced setbacks, an unexpected car repair that depleted their emergency fund, a month where they'd missed a counseling session due to work conflicts, a heated argument when Vanessa briefly slipped back into old spending patterns during a period of high stress. But crucially, they'd faced these challenges head-on, without resorting to their old patterns of deception and financial irresponsibility. Most importantly, they'd maintained their monthly restitution payments without fail. 12 consecutive transfers of $2,000 each had reduced their debt to me by $24,000, a meaningful start on their 7-year repayment plan. As attendees began filing into the lecture hall, I took a moment to center myself. My presentation, titled "Breaking the Cycle, Setting Healthy Financial Boundaries with Adult Children," incorporated not only my personal experience, but also the collective wisdom of our support group members and the professional guidance of financial therapists, counselors, and elder law specialists we'd consulted over the past year. At precisely 9 a.m., the community college's continuing education director introduced me to the audience of nearly 200 people: parents, grandparents, financial professionals, and community advocates. As I approached the podium, I caught sight of Howard giving me an encouraging thumbs up from the back row. "Good morning," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. 1 year ago today, I celebrated my 65th birthday alone in an Italian restaurant while my son and daughter-in-law flew first class to Paris using money stolen from my accounts. A ripple of surprise moved through the audience at my blunt opening. That painful evening became the catalyst for a journey I never expected to take. A journey that brought me here today to share what I've learned about financial boundaries, enabling behaviors, and the possibility of transformation. For the next 45 minutes, I shared my story without embellishment or self-pity. I described the gradual erosion of boundaries that had enabled Eric and Vanessa's financial dependence, the shocking discovery of their fraud, the difficult decision to cancel their credit cards mid-vacation, and the challenging process of rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of accountability rather than enablement. The hardest lesson I learned, I told the attentive audience, was that my well-intentioned financial help was actually harming my son. By repeatedly rescuing him from the consequences of his choices, I was preventing him from developing the skills and resilience he needed to thrive as an adult. I outlined the practical steps we'd taken: the repayment agreement, the mandatory counseling, the monthly financial disclosures, while emphasizing that these structural supports were effective only because Eric and Vanessa had ultimately embraced the opportunity for genuine change. "I can't offer you a perfect solution or a guaranteed outcome," I acknowledged toward the end of my talk. "What worked in my situation might not work in yours. What I can offer is permission to prioritize your own financial security, to set clear boundaries, and to believe that sometimes the most loving action is allowing your adult children to experience the natural consequences of their choices." As I concluded to warm applause, I invited Eric and Vanessa to join me for the Q&A session. Their willingness to answer difficult questions about their past behavior and current recovery process added powerful authenticity to the discussion. "What was the turning point for you?" a woman asked Eric. "When did you realize your behavior had to change?" He considered the question thoughtfully. "Honestly, when we were stranded in Paris, downgraded from the Ritz to a budget hotel, realizing we had no way home except to beg friends for help. That was the first time I truly understood that my mother's support wasn't infinite, that there were real consequences to my actions." "And what would you say to parents who are afraid that setting boundaries might permanently damage their relationship with their adult children?" another attendee asked. "I'd say that enabling destructive behavior is what truly damages relationships," Vanessa replied. "The temporary pain of boundaries is nothing compared to the long-term damage of continued enabling. Our relationship with Martha today is healthier than it's ever been, precisely because she was brave enough to say no when that was the hardest word to say." After the formal program concluded, we spent hours talking with attendees at resource tables, participating in panel discussions, and connecting people with the services they needed. I was particularly moved by how many attendees approached me privately to share their own stories. Parents who had remortgaged homes to support adult children's failing businesses, grandparents raising grandchildren because their own children couldn't manage basic responsibilities, widows whose life insurance payouts had been drained by financially dependent family members. "You've given me courage," one woman whispered, gripping my hand tightly. "I've been afraid to set boundaries with my daughter for years. But hearing your story makes me believe it might actually help her, not just me." By late afternoon, as the conference wound down, exhaustion began to set in. I found a quiet corner to sit for a moment, watching as Eric and Vanessa continued to engage with attendees at the youth financial literacy booth they'd created. Grace joined me, passing me a cup of tea. "Quite a day," she observed. "How are you feeling?" "Overwhelmed," I admitted, but in a good way. When I sat alone at that birthday dinner a year ago, I never imagined my pain would eventually help so many others. "The best teachers are those who've lived what they teach," she replied. "Your authenticity is what makes your message so powerful." As the conference finally concluded and we began packing up materials, Eric approached with an envelope in hand. "What's this?" I asked as he passed it to me. "Open it," he encouraged. Inside was a birthday card, simple but elegant, signed by Eric, Vanessa, and every member of our support group. Beneath their signatures was an invitation to dinner that evening at Antonio's, the same restaurant where both my solitary birthday dinner and my belated celebration had taken place. "We thought it was fitting to come full circle," Eric explained, "to celebrate your actual birthday in the place where everything began. Everyone from the support group is coming," Vanessa added. "They wanted to honor the woman who helped them find their voices and reclaim their lives." Tears threatened as I absorbed the thoughtfulness of their gesture. That would be wonderful. Later that evening, as I entered Antonio's for the third significant meal in this year-long journey, I was greeted by applause from a large table where Howard, Patricia, and a dozen other support group members waited alongside Eric and Vanessa. The maitre d', the same man who had witnessed both my solitary dinner and my belated celebration, gave me a knowing smile as he led me to the head of the table. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Campbell. It's good to see you with friends this year." As I took my seat, surrounded by people whose lives had intersected with mine through shared pain and collective healing, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had begun with betrayal and isolation, but it had led to community and purpose. Howard raised his glass in a toast to Martha, who taught us that saying no can be the most loving word in the English language. To boundaries that heal, rather than walls that divide, Patricia added. And to the courage to let difficult lessons teach us what comfortable enabling never could, Eric concluded, his eyes meeting mine with genuine love and respect. As glasses clinked around the table, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation of the past year. The pain of that solitary birthday dinner had initiated a cascade of changes I could never have anticipated. The support group that had helped dozens of families, the financial literacy program reaching hundreds of young people, the healing in my relationship with Eric and Vanessa, and most importantly, my own growth from enabling parent to empowered advocate. The lessons had been painful, the journey challenging, but the outcome was beyond anything I could have imagined when I made that difficult decision to cancel their credit cards and let them face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes I realized the most loving gift we can give is the opportunity to grow through adversity rather than remain stunted by comfort. Sometimes the most meaningful celebrations aren't marked by expensive presents, but by authentic connections and hard-won wisdom. And sometimes a ruined vacation becomes the first step on a journey toward genuine transformation, not just for those whose plans were disrupted, but for everyone their story touches. As I looked around at the faces of people whose lives had been changed by the ripple effects of that one difficult decision, I knew with certainty that this birthday, my 66th, was truly the most meaningful celebration of my life. Not because it was perfect or elaborate or expensive, but because it was authentic. And in the end, authenticity is the only gift that truly matters. Before I wrap up my story, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for following along. If this journey has touched you in any way, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share this story with someone who might need to be reminded that setting healthy boundaries is an act of love, not punishment. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your financial power and create the healthy relationships you deserve.